Okay, bye. Was a physics student. Mars B.
Okay. You can put the video there, like the microphone.
Oh, this is the microphone.
Yeah, so how's your day going today?
Very, very well. Thank
Very
you.
well? Very
Yes,
well, okay.
excellent.
So, Dr. Carpenter?
Scott Carpenter. Scott,
Okay,
please, just Scott.
Hi, Scott. So, just based on this brief biograph, how should I describe it? It's very complex. Like I'm just surprised that someone can be interested in STEM related and with literature. So we're also involved with education. So as a question, I want to ask you which one do you want to be preferred more, like a literature is, like a STEM?
Well, let me explain something to you.
Oh, okay.
Every human being should find a purpose in life, because when you have a purpose in life, you're generally happy. And if bad things happen to you along the way, they're not that bad because you still have your purpose pulling you forward. Now, my purpose is to help human civilization advance. And I also want to understand why we're here. So, to help civilization advance and to discover more about why we're here, I need to study everything. Now, I start as a scientist. A scientist is a person who can take something that's completely unknown, analyze it, and then understand the pieces, and then put it back together in a way so that the next person can understand it more quickly. So I'm interested in the evolution of human civilization because it gives me a view of where we've been and where we might be going, so I can sort of see what's coming and maybe have a better feel for what the purpose of life is. So a scientist can do literature, languages, physics, mathematics, because that's what a scientist does. They understand systems.
I see. So I want to ask a question related to literature. Since you began this presentation before, with Old English, so I wanted to push it more backward. Let's just say, do you have any have you ever heard about Greek mythology?
Yes, I mean, the Greeks wrote very sophisticated literature about deep ideas, and it took the Greco-Roman period from the Greeks and then later the Roman world. They were very sophisticated in engineering, materials, and literature. But then the weight of what they called the barbarian tribes, the Vikings and the Goths, overran that civilization. Plus, the Roman civilization became very corrupt. So it collapsed, and then we call it the Dark Ages because the writing disappears, mostly, not completely. So the Dark Age of Europe and England basically means we lost all the Latin writing now, all of that goes away. So, and it took until about the year 1350 for Europe to start to come back to the level of the Greeks and the Romans in their writing. And really, they didn't get back to that level until about 1450s.
Yeah. So as an additional question, is kind of related to humanity, how most stories passed down from Greek mythology. For example, it's a story of Orpheus. I'm not sure if you heard that before. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and and many other stories they usually have a bad ending, and also related in Greek mythology, many humans always try to against God, but they always fail. So why do you think people would like to write these things like their own failure?
They write about failure, their own personal failures, but we can think of William Shakespeare would be the English equivalent of some of the Greek writers who wrote tragedies, right? Uh-huh. Well, William Shakespeare started his writing career writing comedy plays. Then something happened to him in his life, and then he started writing tragedies, similar to the Greek tragedies. We can think of Macbeth, one of his great plays. And then something else happens to Shakespeare, and then he writes what are called tragic comedies. They're both tragic and comedic. But the reason people write these tragedies is because they're trying to teach the whole society about being careful about certain things. Don't make the same mistakes that these other people have made. And I think you've heard the adage, those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. And it refers to the bad things that happen.
I see. So another question. So for the this is for the future for those who wants to be a literist and author. So
Who want to be an author?
yeah.
Okay.
So not only author, perhaps like just in general all the artists, like based on the history, many of them didn't get that well of a result in their like lifetime, and most of them like became famous after death. And like for example, Van Gogh.
For the artists, yes,
Yeah.
that's true.
And also Lovecraft, the guy that wrote Cthulhu, like his book was, not being popular at that age, but then extremely popular now. So
Yeah, very few of the so-called artists, whether it's literature or painters or the musicologists, very few of them were successful in their lifetime. In fact, a lot of them were always on the border of being destitute. So, but they chose their art form because they believed in it so much. Rather than pursuing money and wealth, fame and power, they believed life had other values that were more important than those things. So I'm not really sure what to say. Sometimes you have to make a sacrifice for what you love.
I see.
But there's a certain value in doing great art or great literature. And remember, literature has a purpose. I'm sure art has a purpose too. Literature has a purpose, and it has life lessons in it. And the story itself is simply the car that delivers those life lessons and purpose. And it is a benefit to all humanity if you're sharing with humanity a life lessons, wisdom.
So I see. So which one do you think is more important? Do something you want to do, or do something that can make you live better?
Literature addresses this quite a bit. And a lot of the female literature addresses this. Because like I was saying in the Victorian era, the early Victorian era, women in England didn't have very many rights. So it was the most important decision they had to make was, do I marry for love, or do I marry for wealth, fame, and money so my children can have that? And the literature has different women doing different things, and then the literature explores what happens. Are they happy or not happy? Are they wealthy? Their kids may have power, but they're jerks, maybe. And then maybe the poorer woman who married for love has a really full life and a close family. And so then the reader gets to choose, which is better. But if you marry for love, it's very risky. Well, you marry for wealth, it turns out to be risky too, because in most of these stories, the great stories, those who marry for wealth, it usually ends tragically for them. They don't get what they were hoping to achieve. They get nothing, often.
I see. So, do you have any religious belief?
Well, I was raised a Roman Catholic, so I went to church until I was age 16. And then I believe, because I study physics, I teach STEM, and the students I teach end up becoming co-authors on scientific papers too, which is good for them when they get into college. And we've discovered some real things, like where the electricity ring is inside the Earth's core, where it is inside Mars' core, and many other things. What was the question again?
Do you have any religious belief?
Oh yeah. So because I understand enough about the universe and how it's put together, it's shocking at how simple the universe is constructed and how finely designed it is. So I and many other scientists have this phrase called intelligent design. Now that could be a god, okay? But certainly we believe that there is an intelligent designer who even interacts with us in our daily lives. Sometimes I think people can feel when something is a little bit adjusted in your favor. and you're like, wow, that shouldn't have worked out, but it did. And you're like, oh, thanks, buddy. Something like that, right? The other thing is you can look at the world. You can look at the sky. You can look at the trees, and you're like, wow, that is a sunset. That is the most insanely beautiful thing I've ever seen. Now, think of God or the intelligent designer as a master painter that painted all of this, right? Now, a lot of people say to themselves, well, I'm going to die, and then that's that. But if you are the person who creates such great beauty, do you think you're ever going to throw it away? You're not. So I personally believe that there's an intelligent designer. You could call it a God. I'm spiritual in that sense. And I do believe that everything that's ever existed is preserved back through time. We don't know how to travel through time, but we do travel through time. We travel at 1 second per second into the future, right? So maybe there's a way to adjust that or even go back. And I do believe at some point we will be able to go back and capture everything, including everybody. So I have a very optimistic view. I don't think there's anything magic about the universe or biology. I think we just need to know more, to work with it.
Well, in that case, what do you think human is living for?
Why do humans live? Well, that's a great question. That's a question that I can't answer, but I do have a thought. I love to share. In fact, if I'm having a good time, it's not that great if I don't have anybody to share it with. Now, why do we have to suffer is another important question. Can you have free will without suffering? Can you have evolution without suffering and dying? You really can't. So part of suffering enables us to have free will, which means we're not controlled.
Okay, interesting. All right, I think our time is getting up. All right.
All right, guys, I know I talked too much.
Scott.
Hey, man, thanks, buddy.
I'm still